All right, we can get started. Great. So, hi everyone. My name is JennaRose Dahl. I'm the training specialist for the Northstar Digital Literacy Assessment, and I'm here with Leah Hagee, who's the Northstar Curriculum Coordinator, to give you a preview of the Northstar Curriculum. We'll be releasing the first 3 units of the curriculum in August, but we wanted to give you a preview ahead of that. We are re-recording this webinar that we did yesterday, July 10th, because we had some very unfortunate technology issues with Zoom, the software that we use to record our webinars. So with that, the agenda for today is to give you a preview of the Northstar curriculum. We're also going to give you some updates on Northstar Online Learning and the Learning Resources List. So 2 other options for online learning for your students.
So hello everyone, we're happy to share this information with you again, and thanks for being patient with us. So I'm going to share a little bit about what you can expect from the new Northstar Digital Literacy Curriculum, and I'll start by answering a few frequently asked questions about the curriculum. I know that we've received many requests for these lessons to support learners to meet the Northstar Digital Literacy standards, and we really hope that this curriculum answers your needs, and we're very excited to share it with you. So what is the Northstar Digital Literacy Curriculum? It is aligned with those standards that help learners and support them to work towards meeting the requirements of the digital literacy assessments. And the lessons that we have created are learner-centered and interactive, and give students the opportunity to practice skills in an authentic text, an authentic context that connects to their goals. For example, students might be asked to practice editing a resume, get authentic practice with shopping online, or performing internet searches using clear and concise parameters. Another nice feature of the lesson plans is that they're independent of each other, so they're not required to be taught in sequence. This means that you might choose to give the Northstar Digital Literacy Assessment as a pre-assessment for your class or your learners, and use the results page to identify the standards that your students still need work on, and then choose lessons accordingly. So as JennaRose mentioned earlier, the first 3 units will be available for instructors at the end of August. And the units that will be available, we identified those first 3 units after considering the most accessed Northstar Digital Literacy Assessment modules, and we prioritized based on that. And so the first units will be basic computer skills, internet basic, and Microsoft Word. And we do plan to develop additional curricula in the future. One note about the first unit, the basic computer skills unit, is that it will have a really interesting and exciting feature of a few interactive practice tasks. And these interactive tasks will allow learners to navigate to a link in order to practice a skill on interactive modules that we have created. For example, learners might navigate to a learning website to practice using checkboxes to make selections for online shopping, or navigate to a created job application form that will give them feedback and support. Each of the lessons, each of the units will have 6 to 8 lesson plans, and we estimate that each of those lessons will take around 2 hours to complete. A question that we frequently get is about the level that these lessons will be aligned with. The lessons are written to support adult learners at a mid-level English reading comprehension ability, and that's the same reading ability that's required or recommended to complete the Northstar Digital Literacy Assessments. As far as ESL learners, we're thinking that the curriculum will support intermediate level learners or higher. And if you're familiar with the CASAS ABE Reading Standardized Assessment, that's a level 211 or higher. But teachers certainly could adapt the lessons for a lower or a higher level. And we have found in the pilot that this level is accurate for the lessons. As far as resources that you need in order to implement the curriculum in your classroom, We wrote the lessons with a classroom as the one you see on the screen. I'm thinking about a lab setting, but certainly it could work with small groups or one-on-one with some adaptations. The lesson plans do require you to have access to computers, a projector to project the teacher's computer screen, and internet. And some recommendations to use the curriculum in conjunction with the digital literacy assessments. As I mentioned before, we suggest that instructors give the learners the digital literacy assessment module for the unit you're teaching as a pre-assessment, so before you teach any lessons, and then also as a post-assessment. And it's the same assessment that you give as a pre-assessment and as a post-assessment. And when that also can be really helpful for learners, because if they'll get their score before they complete learning with you in the classroom, and then even if they don't reach that 80% passing rate at the end, when you give them the post-assessment, they'll still be able to see where they started and any growth that they made. And that can be really motivating. Now let JennaRose talk about where you can find this curriculum.
Great. So you won't be able to find it yet because it is July and it won't be out until the end of August. But once we do release it, it's going to be found in your admin portal. So you can go to admin.digitalliteracyassessment.org. We plan to put it under the Help tab, which we're going to rename to Resources. Currently under that Help tab, we have our manual, our short videos, resources including computer screeners, flyers, and posters, and the ability to create a support ticket. So the curriculum will live on that same page. We're also going to create a link to it right on the home page of admin.digitalliteracyassessment.org. So as soon as you log in, whether you're a proctor or admin, you'll see the curriculum posted right there.
Thanks, JennaRose. So now I'd like to zoom in a little bit on the lesson plan structure. When considering how the writing team would create the lesson plans, we really thought a lot about predictability. And we wanted to create lesson learning activities to help students build their digital literacy skills and to be able to meet the Northstar standards, of course, but also to be able to use those skills in real-world contexts outside of the classroom. We wanted to provide and create something that's prepared for you with as little lesson prep by teachers as possible. And we also really wanted to create lesson plans that were clear and concise and easy to follow. So in order to do that, we thought a lot about predictability. We really love it. There's so many benefits to a routine lesson structure. The teacher knows what to expect, so it cuts down that prep time when your lessons are similar. Also, students spend time learning the content, not how to do a new learning activity each time, because the learning activities are similar, though the content changes. It also creates balance within the lesson, so there's opportunity for direct instruction and modeling by the teacher, an opportunity for pair work, and also opportunities for learners to practice on their own. So let's take a look at that predictable lesson plan structure that you can expect in each lesson plan. And it's also important to note that Northstar recommends that you teach the lessons using this structure, but we understand that you may need to adapt the plans for your specific sites. So each lesson plan includes an opportunity for these 8 different components. And the first 2, the warm-up and the we will learn, or the opportunity to share objectives, you're really goal setting with your learners for the lesson ahead. And then in the next 3 sections, the model and explain, do it together, and pair explore, it's an opportunity for students to work on a skill with support of their teacher and peers. And finally, in the task and vocabulary work, students are able to independently practice the skill, and then we always end with a wrap-up or a check for understanding. So I'm going to delve a little bit deeper into each of these components. So here you're seeing a sample lesson plan of what the curriculum will look like when it's released. This is the launch page for every lesson. So this is a teacher page, and it has the standards that are addressed in the lesson. And these are the standards that the that the students are working on to demonstrate. In this specific example, students are demonstrating their knowledge of keyboard keys. Also, we have the digital literacy vocabulary in the upper right and a tech concepts box that includes important teaching tips and describes in more detail what students will learn in the lesson. And then always at the bottom of this page will be the teacher prep guide, where you can find out what copies you need to make and what other things to prepare for teaching the lesson. And again, this page is an opportunity primarily for the teacher to become grounded in teaching the lesson. So the next section is the warm-up, and each lesson begins with a warm-up, as I mentioned before. These activities allow the instructor to discover what your learners might already know, and it also could be an opportunity to introduce a new concept to begin the lesson. These often involve pair or small group discussions, allowing students the chance to share with their classmates and build schema for the work ahead. Teachers might also choose to use this time as an opportunity for that pre-assessment, so giving the corresponding Northstar Digital Literacy Assessment module. And in this specific example, learners are doing a think, pair, share, analyzing sentences to notice symbols and capital letters and considering how they would replicate them. In the next section, the instructor is sharing the objectives for the lesson to help set goals for the learning. We recommend that instructors share the objectives with learners visually and read them aloud, taking time to explain any new words or concepts. So for example, here I would write these on the board and I would read them aloud, and I might ask learners to identify the keys highlighted here on their keyboards too. So I would ask them to find the shift key and find the enter key and the backspace key. Communicating goals is motivating and grounding for adult learners, and it's really helpful to be clear about what the goals are for your day's lessons. And if you know from the student's result page from their digital literacy assessment that students need to practice these specific skills, this would be a time to acknowledge that, to help learners know that you are specifically addressing the skills they need to work on. Now we've prepared the class and warmed up and shared the learning goals with students. The next sections are the instruction and practice sections of the lesson plan. So in this section, in the model and explain, the teacher models the new skill for learners while explaining how they are doing it. So the teacher is thinking aloud and discussing and showing how to do something. In this specific example, the teacher is showing how to make capital letters and symbols using the shift key. So teachers will find this section to have a list of things to show and explain to the learners. And it's really important that learners observe during this time as the teacher projects on their computer screen. The students shouldn't be working on their own computers, because it's really an opportunity for learners to see the skill modeled. And if students are working on their own computers simultaneously, it makes it challenging for them to give their full attention. It's also important to keep this section short to avoid overwhelming learners with new information. We really want students to remain engaged at this stage and during the whole lesson, but especially when you're introducing new information. In this example, the teacher's only showing students 3 small skills: how to make capital letters, how to use enter to go to the next line, and how to create a symbol using a shift key. Moving on to the next section of the lesson plan is called the Do It Together. And where the model and explain is more passive, the Do It Together is an opportunity for learners to practice the skill that was modeled with instructor support and coaching. So the teacher might ask the class to restate the steps they used to complete the digital literacy skill that was modeled, or you might ask them to complete a simple task with support. And to support learners to practice a skill, the teacher might prompt the class with questions like, what should I do first? Or do you remember how to open a Word document? This is really an opportunity for the class to talk through the skill together and maybe try it a little. And in this example, the teacher asks the students to restate what has been modeled, how to make capital letters and symbols using shift. And then they're copying sentences using the skills that have been modeled. And it's important to note that there may be 2 model and explains and 2 do it togethers within a lesson, depending on the content standards that the learners will be working on. Here, the teacher defines cursor and backspace too, and then lets learners practice it. And the reason that there might be 2 is because, again, we never want that model and explain the instruction portion to be too long, because we really want learners to be engaged in and then have hands-on opportunity to practice a skill and talk through it. The next section of the lesson is called the Pair Explore, and this might be the most important portion of the lesson plan. In this section, learners will have an opportunity to explore the skills that have been modeled, explained, and practiced together. We also recommend here in the Pair Explore that students work in pairs, and if possible on one computer. So we say 2 students to 1 computer. And why? It's so important for students to work in pairs because they can support each other to problem solve. It's an opportunity for more open-ended experiment time to explore before they use that skill to complete a more structured task. So during this time, there just will be a list of things that students can play around with and try out, and that helps them develop skills to use in real life to problem solve. And the teacher guide that will accompany the curriculum will give more ideas on how to facilitate this Pair Explore time, including a list of questions to help teachers to do more prompting and questioning. But really, when learners have the opportunity to Pair Explore, they feel more confident to try new things. And that's so important because building distance learning skills is all about experimenting and learning through trial and error. And so we need to be really intentional about setting up these opportunities for students in the classroom, because digital literacy skills are developed through practice. And we want our learners to build the confidence in trying a skill on their own without step-by-step instructions from the teacher. So after learners have had some experiment time with the skills, they're going to apply those skills to an authentic task. So usually this is an independent task that they're working on their own, but sometimes they might have pairs depending on the level of complexity of the task. But it's an opportunity for deeper practice and an opportunity for them to, like I said, apply what they've learned. In this example, learners are copying text and identifying errors and correcting them using the skills they've learned. And usually there's a handout that accompanies this to guide learners. Some additional examples of tasks that might come up in other units would be using the skills that they've learned to complete, to fill out a form, or to complete an internet search to find the best price for an item, something like that. And here is the handout that goes along with the previous task. So we're asking students to type this and correct any errors that they have after typing. The next section of the lesson plan is vocabulary work. So learners have the opportunity to practice the target vocabulary used throughout the lesson again. This portion often also includes a handout for learners. It's important to have vocabulary work come at the end of the lesson after the words have already been introduced and practiced, and that's very intentional because it allows learners to have context for the words that they're learning. So each lesson plan only contains a maximum of 7 vocabulary words. We wanted to ensure that mastery of the digital literacy vocab was possible and manageable. And this section also allows teachers to check for understanding of the terms that you've presented and practiced throughout the lesson. It's also important to note that because the mostly independent task comes before the vocabulary work, if you have learners that finish the task early, then you could give them the vocabulary work. And so it allows some flexibility within your lesson plan too. And here is an example of a vocabulary work handout. It's a matching exercise. Finally, every lesson has a wrap-up, and that's a quick opportunity to check in with learners. And that could be a review of the learning or a time to reflect on the skills that they've learned, or a check for understanding, or more, or multiple of those. And it's important to leave time at the end of the lesson for this closure for students to reflect on what they've accomplished. And you might also choose to refer back to the We Will Learn, to the objectives, to make sure that you've met them with your class. And this also might be an opportunity where you choose to post-test learners if you've reached the end of your lesson. And in this example, students are asked to type a sentence using capital letters, and that was the goal of the lesson. So I will let JennaRose talk a little bit about how we will collect feedback.
Yeah. So once we set out the curriculum, we're going to send along a feedback form to all of our Northstar testing sites. And that we'll check really periodically, and we'll kind of consolidate that feedback. Because we're a very small staff, really we're about 6 people, none of us working full-time on Northstar. So we're very small but mighty. But because of our size, we aren't going to make changes instantly. Instead, we'll have this feedback form that you can fill out to give us your input on the curriculum, and then we'll make those changes periodically. Because Northstar is used in several different contexts, including everything from adult education, correction systems, colleges, middle schools, libraries, employment offices, many different places, we might not make a change that you suggest if it's not an advantage to other schools and settings. And then coming soon for Northstar, we're going to be releasing 3 different educational options. So that first one is our Northstar Curriculum. That's what we've been talking about this webinar. The next thing we're going to be releasing, Northstar Online Learning. This is going to be a learner portal where your students and test takers can sign in with their email address and password, and they'll be able to complete online learning that aligns with the Northstar standards. So it's going to be really great. A student will be able to take their results page and click on different standards that they missed to be linked to online learning. Their progress will be tracked online, and we're also working on including clock time, hours that they're spending in those lessons. So you'll be able to get proxy hours for those also. The third thing that we're putting out is a learning resources list. So this is going to be a list similar to the St. Paul Public Library Learning Guide that will have links to outside videos and articles to align with Northstar. So those first 2 options, the Northstar Curriculum and Northstar Online Learning, those are only going to be available to our paying testing sites. The last option with those links to outside videos and resources, that'll be available to the public. Yep. And then last we have some questions. So some of the questions that we were asked in our webinar yesterday were, what do you mean when you say pre-assessment? So
yeah, I can talk about that. So the pre-assessment, when I use that term, I'm just talking about using the Northstar Digital Literacy Assessment modules as a pre-assessment. So there's no difference in the post or pre-assessment. It's just that the timing of when you choose to give that assessment. So if I was going to teach a unit, I would give all of my students the assessment for that unit, like basic computer skills. I would give that to them at the beginning of the class, and then I would also give them that after I had been through the lessons.
Okay, another question we were asked yesterday was, does the assessment have to be proctored? And it does not have to be. It's definitely not a requirement. I personally recommend proctoring the assessment each time, especially because we've made the proctor process so much easier than it was before. It's pretty quick to set people up for the proctored assessment. And that way, if your student passes, they will get a certificate. So I would hate to have someone take an assessment and pass and then have to have them retake it with the proctor mode on to get a certificate. So I recommend setting them up proctored when you're giving an assessment, but it really does depend on your context. If you have students who don't want certificates or they're not important to them, maybe you don't want to set them up for a proctored assessment. You can also get a record of all of those test results just by entering in that location code for testing locations. So you can enter that in, you'll get a record of the assessment results, but you won't get a certificate. But as far as how it works with the curriculum, it doesn't have to be proctored. It's just nice to have that option of getting a certificate and to have the record of their pre and post tests so you can compare, how they do after you've taught them. Another question we got was, is the curriculum aligned to any other standards?
The curriculum is aligned to the Northstar Digital Literacy Standards, as I mentioned before, and currently it isn't aligned to other standards. We really wanted to focus on content here, But the rigor of the lessons, of course, does help learners build language skills in the classroom too.
Awesome. Another question we got asked was about our next webinars. So we will have another webinar about the Northstar Curriculum in September. So that will be September 27th at 1 p.m. Central. And it'll be pretty similar to this webinar that we've just done. The webinar after that will be November 13th at 10 a.m. Central. And that one will be about Northstar online learning. So that one will be about the platform we're making for students to log in and learn.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. If you do have any other questions, feel free to email us at support@digitalliteracyassessment.org. Thank you.
Thank you.